The bullet that killed Harlan Garrett's brother took something from him that no amount of whiskey or wandering could ever bring back, and he had been trying to outrun that hollow feeling for 3 years when he rode into Roswell, New Mexico in the summer of 1883 with nothing but a tired horse and a soul that felt twice as heavy as his body. The dust rose in golden clouds beneath his mare's hooves as Harlan guided her down the main street, past the general store and the saloon with its faded paint and promises of forgetting. He had no particular reason for choosing Roswell except that it was there, and he was tired of riding. The town sat in the Pecos Valley like a collection of weathered wooden boxes, sun-bleached and stubborn, clinging to existence in a landscape that did not suffer fools or the weak-hearted. The heat pressed down on everything with an insistence that made even breathing feel like work, but Harlan barely noticed anymore. He had stopped noticing most things after that day in Colorado when his brother Jesse took a bullet meant for someone else during a bank robbery gone wrong, all because Jesse had been trying to be a hero and Harlan had not stopped him. He dismounted outside the livery stable, his legs stiff from days in the saddle, and led his mare inside where the shade felt like a mercy. An older man with silver hair and sun-darkened skin looked up from mucking a stall. "Need boarding for her," Harlan said, his voice rough from disuse. He had not spoken to another person in nearly a week. "2 bits a night, includes feed and water." The stableman took the reins, running an experienced eye over the mare. "She looks about done in. You ride far?" "Far enough." Harlan paid for 3 nights, figuring that would give him time to decide whether Roswell was a place to stay or just another town to leave behind. They were all starting to look the same to him anyway. He found a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman whose husband had worked on the railroad before an accident claimed him. She did not ask questions, which Harlan appreciated, and she kept a clean house with decent meals. His room was small, just a bed and a washstand and a window that looked out onto the street, but it was more than he needed. That first evening, Harlan sat in the dining room with 3 other boarders, picking at beef stew while they talked around him. He learned that Roswell was growing, that there was talk of more ranches starting up, that the railroad might come through eventually. None of it mattered to him. He had stopped thinking about the future somewhere along the way, living instead in a perpetual present that asked nothing of him except that he keep breathing and moving. After dinner, he walked to the saloon because that was what men like him did in towns like this. The Crystal Palace was neither crystal nor palatial, just a low-ceilinged room that smelled of tobacco and spilled beer and unwashed bodies. Harlan ordered whiskey and took it to a table in the corner, settling in to drink alone. He was on his 2nd glass when the door opened and she walked in. She was not the kind of woman who usually entered saloons, that much was immediately clear. She wore a simple calico dress in a soft yellow color that somehow had not been completely dulled by the dust, and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun with a few curls escaping around her face. She had a basket over one arm and a smile that seemed to light up the dim interior of the saloon like someone had opened a window to let in the sun. "Evening, gentlemen," she said, and her voice had a warmth to it that made several of the men look up from their cards and drinks. "I'm collecting for the church social next Saturday. We're raising money to repair the schoolhouse roof before the monsoon season starts." Harlan watched as she moved from table to table, and what struck him was not just that she was pretty, though she was, but that she seemed genuinely happy to be there. She laughed at the rough jokes the cowboys told her, thanked each donation with what appeared to be real gratitude, and somehow made even the hardest-looking men in the room soften a little when she spoke to them. When she reached his table, she met his eyes with a directness that startled him. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Katherine Thorne. Most folks call me Kate." "Harlan Garrett." He found himself sitting up straighter, aware suddenly of how he must look after days on the trail. "Just rode in today." "Welcome to Roswell, then." She smiled at him, and something in his chest shifted uncomfortably. "Would you care to contribute to our cause? Even a few pennies help." He should have said no. He should have gone back to his whiskey and his solitude. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out $1, dropping it into her basket. Her eyes widened. "That's very generous, Mr. Garrett, thank you." "It's just money." The words came out harsher than he intended, and he saw her smile falter slightly. But she recovered quickly, her expression settling into something gentler. "Maybe so, but it will make a real difference to the children. They deserve a schoolhouse that doesn't leak when it rains." She moved on to the next table, but Harlan found his eyes following her around the room. There was something about the way she carried herself, a lightness that seemed impossible in a world as hard as this one. She did not seem weighed down by anything, and he could not understand how that was possible. Everyone carried burdens. Everyone had things that pressed on them until it felt like they might break. After she left, the saloon felt darker somehow, as if she had taken some essential brightness with her. Harlan finished his whiskey and walked back to the boarding house, but sleep was slow to come. He kept thinking about the way Kate Thorne had smiled at him, as if she saw something worth smiling at. The next morning he woke with the sun and realized he had slept better than he had in months. He could not account for it. Nothing had changed. Jesse was still dead. Harlan was still the man who had failed to save him. But something felt different. Some small shift he could not name. He spent the day looking for work because his money would not last forever, and idle hands gave his mind too much room to wander into dark places. The first ranch he tried was not hiring, but the foreman directed him to the Double R spread about 5 miles south of town. The owner, a gruff man named Robert Ross, looked him over with a critical eye. "You know cattle? Enough." Harlan had worked ranches before, in between his wandering. "Can you handle a rope?" "Yes, sir." "I need men who will show up sober and work a full day. I don't tolerate drinking on the job or causing trouble in town. You cause problems. You're done. Clear?" "Clear." Ross hired him on the spot, telling him to report at dawn the next day. The pay was decent, $30 a month plus meals. It was honest work, which was more than Harlan felt he deserved most days, but he took it anyway. He saw Kate again 2 days later at the general store. Harlan had gone in to buy tobacco and a new shirt since his old one was worn through at the elbows. She was at the counter, examining a bolt of blue fabric with the storekeeper, discussing yardage and price with the easy confidence of a woman who knew the value of things. "Mr. Garrett," she said when she noticed him, "how are you settling in?" "Well enough." He held his shirt awkwardly, suddenly conscious of the mundane domestic nature of the errand. "Found work at the Double R." "That's wonderful. Mr. Ross is a good man to work for. Fair and honest." She smiled at him again, and he felt that same uncomfortable shift in his chest. "Are you planning to attend the church social on Saturday? There will be food and dancing. The whole town comes out." "I'm not much for socializing." "That's what everyone says until they get there and realize they're having a good time." She tilted her head, studying him with those clear eyes. "You should come. It would be a good way to meet people, and you might find that hard times feel a little lighter when you share them with a community." The words hit him harder than she could have known. Hard times. That was one way to describe the weight he carried. But the idea that they could feel lighter seemed impossible. "I'll think about it," he said, though he had no intention of going. "I hope you do." She paid for her fabric and left with a cheerful goodbye, and the store seemed dimmer after she was gone. Harlan tried to put her out of his mind. He focused on the work at the Double R, which was hard and hot and exactly what he needed. He mended fences and moved cattle and rode fence lines until his body ached in ways that left no room for his mind to wander. The other hands were decent men, mostly quiet types who worked hard and did not ask too many questions. He ate his meals with them, listening to their talk of weather and cattle prices and the upcoming social, and tried to feel like he was part of something again. But at night, alone in his room at the boarding house, the darkness crept back in. He thought about Jesse, about the moment the light left his brother's eyes, about the promises Harlan had made to their mother about keeping Jesse safe. He had failed. That failure was a stone in his chest that never got lighter, never shifted, just sat there reminding him with every breath that he had not been good enough when it mattered most. Saturday came, And Harlan told himself he was not going to the church social. He spent the morning working at the ranch. And when Ross released the hands at midday so they could clean up for the event, Harlan rode back to town with no intention of attending. But Mrs. Chen had other ideas. "You should go," she said when she saw him heading up to his room. "All work and no rest makes a man forget how to live." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. I see it in your eyes. You're carrying something heavy." She spoke with the directness of someone who had seen enough of life to recognize suffering. Sometimes the only way to set down a burden is to let other people help carry it, even if just for an evening. Harlan wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he found himself washing up and changing into his one good shirt and walking toward the church as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The social was being held in the yard behind the church, where long tables had been set up and lanterns hung from wires stretched between posts. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the air, and someone was playing a fiddle while children ran between the adults, their laughter bright and uncomplicated. It seemed like the whole town had turned out. Families and cowboys and merchants all mixing together in a way that felt surprisingly comfortable. Harlan stood at the edge of it all, unsure what to do with himself. He had forgotten how to be part of things like this if he had ever really known. "You came." The voice was warm and pleased, and he turned to find Kate beside him. She wore a dress of pale green that brought out the color of her eyes, and her smile was genuinely happy to see him. "I'm so glad." "Mrs. Chen convinced me," he admitted. "Remind me to thank her." Kate linked her arm through his with a natural ease that stunned him. "Come on, you should eat. The ladies have outdone themselves this year." She led him to the food tables, piling a plate high with roasted chicken and potatoes and beans and cornbread, chatting the whole time about who had made what and the friendly competition between the best cooks in town. Harlan found himself listening not just to her words, but to the music of her voice, the way she seemed to find joy in the smallest details. They sat at one of the long tables with several other people, and Kate made introductions. There was the doctor, a young man named Samuel Wright, who had come west from Philadelphia. There was Maria Alvarez, who ran the dress shop with her mother. There was Tom Baker, the blacksmith, and his wife Ellen. They were all friendly, welcoming him with the easy acceptance of people who were used to strangers becoming neighbors. "How are you finding Roswell?" Dr. Wright asked. "It's a good town," Harlan said carefully. "Seems like decent people." "We like to think so." Ellen Baker smiled. "It's not fancy, but it's home." The conversation flowed around him, and Harlan found himself gradually relaxing. Kate kept him included without being pushy about it, asking him questions that were easy to answer and laughing at his responses in a way that made him feel like he was more interesting than he knew himself to be. After the meal, the dancing started. Harlan watched from the sidelines as couples took to the cleared space that served as a dance floor, moving through reels and square dances with varying degrees of skill and enthusiasm. The fiddle was joined by a guitar and a harmonica, and the music filled the warm evening air with something that felt almost like hope. "Do you dance, Mr. Garrett?" Kate appeared beside him again, her face flushed from a previous turn around the floor. "Not in a long time." "That's not a no." She held out her hand. "Dance with me." He should have declined. He should have made some excuse. But her hand was extended and her eyes were bright with invitation. And before he knew what he was doing, he had taken her hand and let her lead him onto the floor. The dance was a simple waltz, which was lucky because Harlan's skills were rusty at best. But Kate was a good partner, following his lead when he managed to remember the steps and gently guiding him when he faltered. She was light in his arms, and she smelled like lavender and sunshine, and for the first time in 3 years, Harlan felt something other than the weight of grief. "You're doing fine," she said, looking up at him with encouraging warmth. "See? It's not so hard. You make it easier." The words came out without thought, and he saw surprise flicker across her face. "That's kind of you to say." They turned across the floor, and Harlan found himself noticing details. The way her hand felt in his, small but strong, the exact shade of her eyes, which were more gold than brown in the lantern light, the way her smile reached all the way to those eyes, genuine and unguarded. When the song ended, he did not want to let her go. The realization shook him. "Thank you for the dance," Kate said. "That was lovely." "Thank you for asking me." She was claimed by another partner after that, and Harlan stepped back to the sidelines. But he did not leave. He stayed through the evening, watching the dancers and listening to the music and feeling something in his chest loosen just a fraction. Kate danced with many partners, but she kept finding her way back to him between songs, bringing him a cup of punch or just standing beside him to catch her breath. They talked about small things, easy things, the weather, the town, the people around them. She told him she'd been teaching at the schoolhouse for 2 years since coming to Roswell from St. Louis after her father died. She lived with her aunt and uncle on their small ranch just outside town. She loved teaching, loved the children, loved the way the sky looked over the desert at sunset. "What about you?" she asked. "What brought you to Roswell?" The question he had been dreading. Harlan looked down at his hands. "Just drifting. No place in particular to be." "That sounds lonely." It was. He had been lonely for so long he had forgotten what it felt like not to be. But he could not say that, could not open that door. "I'm used to my own company." Kate was quiet for a moment, and when he glanced at her, he saw something thoughtful in her expression. Sometimes we get used to things that are not good for us. We tell ourselves we're fine with being alone or carrying everything ourselves, but that's not how people are meant to live. And how are people meant to live? Together, helping each other, sharing the load. She turned to face him fully. "You seem like someone who's been carrying something heavy for a long time, Harlan. I just want you to know that you don't have to carry it alone." The words were too close to what Mrs. Chen had said, too close to the truth he had been avoiding. Harlan felt his defenses rise. "You don't know anything about me?" "You're right, I don't." Kate's voice remained gentle, unjudging. "But I'd like to, if you'd let me." He wanted to walk away. He wanted to retreat to his room and his solitude and the familiar weight of his grief. But something in her eyes held him there, some combination of kindness and strength that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, she could understand. "My brother died 3 years ago," he heard himself say. "I was supposed to protect him, and I failed. That's what I'm carrying." Kate's expression softened with compassion. "I'm so sorry. That must be incredibly hard." "It is what it is." Harlan's voice came out rough. "Nothing changes it. No, nothing can change what happened. But you don't have to let it define every moment of your life going forward." She touched his arm lightly. "Your brother would not want you to stop living because he did. You didn't know him. But I'm guessing he loved you. People who love us want us to be happy even when they're gone." The words cracked something inside him, and Harlan had to look away before she could see too much. They stood in silence for a moment, the music and laughter swirling around them, and he felt the strange sensation of a burden shifting, not disappearing but becoming just slightly less crushing. "Thank you for telling me," Kate said finally, "and thank you for coming tonight. I know it probably was not easy." "It was not as bad as I expected," he admitted. She laughed, a bright sound that made him want to smile. "High praise indeed, I'll take it." The evening wound down eventually, families gathering their tired children and couples drifting toward home. Harlan walked Kate back toward where her uncle was waiting with their wagon, and she thanked him again for the dance. "Will I see you at church tomorrow?" she asked. "I'm not much for church." "Another thing you're not much for." Her tone was teasing but gentle. "You might be surprised how much better things feel when you let yourself be part of a community." "Maybe." He did not commit, but he also did not dismiss the idea entirely. She smiled as if that was enough, climbing up into the wagon beside her aunt. "Good night, Harlan. I'm glad you came tonight." He watched them drive away, the wagon creaking into the darkness, and realized he was glad too. The evening had not erased his grief or his guilt, but for a few hours They had felt less overwhelming. Kate was right about that, at least. Hard times did feel lighter in the presence of other people, especially in the presence of someone like her. Harlan did not go to church the next morning, but he thought about it. That was progress of a sort. The days fell into a rhythm after that. He worked at the Double R, long hours under the relentless sun that left him exhausted in the best possible way. He took his meals at Mrs. Chen's boarding house and slept better than he had in years, and he thought about Kate Thorne more than he wanted to admit. He saw her around town occasionally. She always smiled and stopped to talk, asking about his work and telling him about her students. She had a gift for making conversation feel natural and comfortable, never prying but always genuinely interested. Harlan found himself looking forward to those encounters, brief as they were. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the church social, Harlan was in town picking up supplies when he saw a crowd gathered outside the school. He could hear a child crying and adult voices raised in concern. Without thinking, he pushed through to see what was happening. Kate was kneeling beside a boy of about 8 who was clutching his arm and sobbing. Blood seeped between his fingers. "What happened?" Harlan asked, dropping to one knee beside them. "He fell during recess and cut his arm on some broken glass," Kate said. Her face was calm, but her voice was tight with worry. "It's deep. He needs the doctor." "I'll get him." Harlan stood, but Kate shook her head. "Dr. Wright is out at the Henderson place delivering a baby. He won't be back until tonight." Harlan looked at the boy's arm and made a quick decision. "I've stitched up men before. If you trust me, I can close it." Kate met his eyes searching for a long moment, then nodded. "All right." She helped him carry the boy, whose name was Tommy, into the schoolhouse. Harlan sent one of the older students to fetch his saddlebag from the livery, which had a needle and thread he kept for emergency repairs. While they waited, Kate cleaned the wound with water and whiskey, talking to Tommy in a soothing voice that gradually calmed his sobs to sniffles. "You're being so brave," she told him. "Mr. Garrett is going to fix your arm up just fine." When the saddlebag arrived, Harlan threaded the needle with hands that were steadier than he expected. He had done this during the war and a few times since, but never with a child. He worked carefully, making small, neat stitches while Kate held Tommy's hand and kept him distracted with a story about a cowboy and a magic horse. "There." Harlan tied off the last stitch and sat back. "You'll have a scar, but you'll be fine." "Like a real cowboy?" Tommy asked, his eyes wide. "Just like a real cowboy." Kate smiled, then looked at Harlan with something that might have been admiration. "Thank you. That was well done." Just what needed doing. After Tommy's mother came to collect him, full of gratitude and promises to pay for the doctoring, Kate and Harlan were left alone in the schoolhouse. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the rows of small desks and the chalkboard with its half-erased arithmetic problems. "Where did you learn to stitch wounds?" Kate asked. "The war, and a few years of hard living after." "You're a man of unexpected skills, Harlan Garrett." "Just things I picked up along the way." He began packing up his saddlebag, uncomfortable with her praise. "Stay for a moment." Kate's voice was soft. "Please." He stopped, looking at her. She had moved to stand near the window, the light catching in her hair and turning it to burnished copper. There was something vulnerable in her expression that he had not seen before. "I want to tell you something," she said, "about why I came to Roswell." Harlan waited, sensing that this was important. "My father died of pneumonia 3 years ago. My mother had already passed when I was young. I was teaching in St. Louis, but after he died, I could not seem to find my footing again. Everything reminded me of him. The grief was suffocating." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I came west because I needed to get away from all those memories. I needed to find a place where I could breathe again." "And did you find that place?" "I did. Here in Roswell with these people in this life." She turned to face him. "But it was not the place that saved me, Harlan. It was the choice to let people in, to let myself be part of something again, even though it scared me. The choice to live instead of just exist." He understood what she was saying, what she was trying to tell him. It's not that easy. I know it's not. Believe me, I know. She stepped closer. But I see you carrying this weight, and I recognize it because I carried something similar. And I want you to know that it can get better. Not easy, but better. Why do you care? The question came out harsher than he intended. Why does it matter to you what I'm carrying? Kate was quiet for a moment, her eyes searching his face. Because even in the short time I've known you, I've seen glimpses of the man you are underneath all that grief. And I think he's someone worth knowing, someone worth saving. The words hit him like a physical blow. No one had said anything like that to him in so long. He had been drifting for 3 years, convinced that he was not worth much of anything, and here was this woman telling him otherwise. I don't know if I can be that person anymore, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Then maybe you need to find out. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. And maybe you don't have to do it alone. Harlan looked down at their joined hands, feeling the weight of the moment. He could pull away, could retreat back into his solitude and his grief. It would be easier, safer. But standing there with Kate, feeling the warmth of her touch and seeing the hope in her eyes, he realized he did not want easy or safe anymore. He wanted to feel something other than the endless gray of grief. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Neither do I, really. She smiled, a little uncertain but genuine. But we can figure it out together. That evening, Harlan found himself at the boarding house writing a letter to his mother for the first time in over a year. He told her he was in Roswell, that he had found work, that he was doing all right. It was not much, but it was a start, a small step toward rejoining the world of the living. After that day at the school, things shifted between him and Kate. It was not dramatic or sudden, just a gradual deepening of their connection. He started attending church on Sundays, sitting in the back pew but present. Kate would find him after the service, and they would walk together through town, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her students, about their struggles and triumphs, her face lighting up with genuine affection for each child. She told him about her aunt and uncle, who had taken her in without hesitation when she needed a fresh start. She told him about the books she loved to read, about her dreams of one day having a school with enough resources that every child could learn properly. In turn, Harlan found himself talking about things he had not spoken of in years. He told her about Jesse, about the brother who had been bright and idealistic and too good for the world that took him. He told her about their childhood in Kansas, about their parents who had worked a small farm and taught their sons the value of honest labor. He told her about the years of drifting, trying to outrun the guilt and the grief, and how tired he was of running. You're not running anymore, Kate said one afternoon as they sat by the creek outside town, their feet dangling in the cool water. You're here. You're present. That counts for something. I'm trying. It was the most honest thing he had said in a long time. That's all anyone can do. As summer deepened into monsoon season, the rains came in the afternoons, great thundering downpours that turned the streets to mud and filled the air with the smell of wet earth. Harlan loved those storms, the way they made everything feel clean and renewed. He often stood on the porch of the boarding house and watched the lightning fork across the sky, feeling something in his chest expand with each crash of thunder. One evening, Kate found him there. She had been caught in the rain on her way home from the school and took shelter on the porch, her dress soaked through and her hair hanging in wet tendrils around her face. Some weather, she said, laughing as she wrung out her skirt. Let me get you a towel. Harlan went inside and returned with 2 towels, draping one around her shoulders. Thank you. She dried her face and hair, still smiling. I love these storms. They make me feel alive. Me too. He stood beside her, watching the rain hammer down, like the world is washing itself clean. That's a beautiful way to put it. She looked up at him, and something in her expression made his heart quicken. You have a poet's soul, Harlan Garrett. I'm just a cowboy. You're much more than that. She said it with such conviction that he almost believed her. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the storm. Harlan was acutely aware of her presence beside him, the warmth of her despite the wet clothes, the way she fit naturally into the space next to him as if she had always been there. "Kate," he said, his voice rough with emotion he could not quite name, "I need to tell you something." She turned to him, water still dripping from her hair. What is it?" "I'm not good at this, at talking about feelings or any of it, but I need you to know that these past weeks, getting to know you have mattered to me, more than I can properly say." He struggled for the right words. "You make even hard times feel light. I did not know how much I needed that until you showed me." Kate's eyes shone with something that might have been tears or might have been the rain. "Oh, Harlan, I'm still carrying a lot. I'm still working through things, but when I'm with you, it does not feel as heavy. You make me want to be better, to try harder, to live instead of just going through the motions." She reached up and touched his face, her hand cool and damp against his cheek. "You make me want those things too. You make me braver. You're the bravest person I know." "Not always." Her smile was tremulous. "I've been afraid to let myself care about anyone since my father died. It hurt so much to lose him that I told myself it was safer not to get too close to people. But then you rode into town with all your sadness and strength, and I could not seem to help myself." Harlan covered her hand with his, holding it against his face. "I don't want to hurt you. Life hurts sometimes. That's just how it is." She moved closer. "But it also has moments like this, standing in the rain with someone who understands. That's worth the risk." He kissed her then, unable to stop himself. It was gentle and searching. A question and an answer all at once. She kissed him back with a sweetness that made his chest ache, her arms coming up around his neck. The rain pounded down around them and thunder rolled across the sky, and Harlan felt like he was waking up after a long sleep. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Kate smiled up at him with such joy that he could not help but smile back. "Well," she said, "that was worth getting caught in the rain for." He laughed, actually laughed, and realized it was the first time he had done so in longer than he could remember. "You are something else, Kate Thorne." "I hope that's a good thing." "It's the best thing." They stood wrapped in each other's arms while the storm raged around them, and Harlan felt a peace he had thought lost to him forever. The grief was still there, the guilt still present, but they were no longer the only things defining him. There was also this, the warmth of Kate's body against his, the hope rising in his chest, the possibility of a future that held more than just survival. After that evening, they were openly courting, which meant enduring the friendly teasing of the town and the knowing looks from Mrs. Chen. Kate's aunt and uncle invited Harlan to dinner, a somewhat nerve-wracking affair during which he was politely but thoroughly interrogated about his intentions and prospects. Kate's uncle, a rancher named Thomas Thorne, was a gruff man who clearly loved his niece and wanted to be sure she was being courted by someone worthy. "I know I don't have much," Harlan said honestly. "Just a job and a horse and a few dollars saved. But I care about Kate, and I would do everything in my power to make her happy." Thomas studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "That's about all a man can promise. The rest is just details." Kate's aunt, Susan, was warmer, but no less protective. "Our Kate is special. She deserves someone who sees that." "I do see it." Harlan met her eyes. "Every day." He must have passed whatever test they were administering, because after that he was invited to Sunday dinners and made to feel like part of the family. It was strange and wonderful to be welcomed so fully, to sit at a table with people who genuinely wanted him there. As autumn arrived and the heat began to ease, Harlan found himself thinking about the future for the first time in years. He was still working at the Double R, but Robert Ross had taken notice of his skills and promoted him to foreman, which came with better pay and more responsibility. It also meant he could start thinking about building a life beyond just day-to-day survival. He wanted that life to include Kate. The certainty of it grew with every day they spent together, every conversation, every shared smile. She had become essential to him in a way that both thrilled and terrified him. He had lost Jessie and nearly been destroyed by it. The thought of losing Kate was unbearable, but so was the thought of not having her in his life. One Sunday in October, they took a picnic lunch out to a spot Kate loved, a small rise that overlooked the valley with the Pecos River winding through it like a silver ribbon. The cottonwoods were turning gold, and the air had a crispness that promised winter eventually. They ate fried chicken and biscuits and talked about small things comfortable in each other's company. After the meal, Kate lay back on the blanket and looked up at the sky, and Harlan propped himself on one elbow beside her, content to watch her profile against the blue. "What are you thinking about?" she asked without looking at him. "You, us, the future." "That's a lot of thinking." She turned her head to smile at him. "Care to share?" Harlan took a breath, gathering his courage. "I've been saving money. I have enough now for a small piece of land, maybe start building a house. Nothing fancy, but solid, a place to call home." "That sounds wonderful. I want you in that home with me, Kate, as my wife." The words came out in a rush, not as elegant as he had planned, but sincere. "I know I'm still working through things, and I know I'm not always easy to be around, but I love you. I want to build a life with you." Kate sat up, her eyes wide. "You love me?" "I do. More than I knew I could love anyone." He reached for her hand. "You brought me back to life, Kate. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to want things, to believe in tomorrow. I don't have much to offer, but I have a heart that's yours if you'll take it." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, Harlan. I'll marry you. I love you too, so much." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as relief and joy surged through him. She loved him. This woman who was light and laughter and everything good had chosen him, broken pieces and all. They sat together on that hillside as the sun moved across the sky, making plans and dreaming dreams. They would marry in the spring, giving Harlan time to get the house started. Kate would continue teaching until they had children, which they both wanted, a family to fill the home they would build together. It was not a grand life or an easy one, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. The town was delighted by the news of their engagement. Mrs. Chen hugged Kate and told Harlan he was a lucky man, which he knew to be absolutely true. Dr. Wright offered his congratulations. The ladies at church began planning the wedding with an enthusiasm that made Kate laugh and Harlan slightly nervous. Through the winter, Harlan worked on building their house. He chose a spot on the land he purchased a few miles outside town, near the creek where he and Kate had spent that afternoon in the summer. Several of the men from the ranch helped him on Sundays, and slowly a small wooden house took shape. 2 bedrooms, a main room that served as kitchen and living space, a porch that faced east to catch the morning sun. It was simple but sturdy, built with care and the dream of the life it would hold. Kate came out to see the progress whenever she could, bringing lunch for the workers and walking through the framed rooms with obvious joy. "It's going to be beautiful," she said, squeezing Harlan's hand. "Our home. Our home." The words filled him with a contentment he had never expected to feel again. That winter was cold, but not bitter, and Harlan spent his evenings by the fire at the boarding house, reading books Kate lent him and writing letters to his mother, who was overjoyed by the news of his engagement and planning to come out for the wedding. He had not seen her in almost 4 years, and the thought of reuniting brought both nervousness and anticipation. In February, Harlan received word that his mother would arrive in early March. He met her stage with Kate by his side, his heart pounding with a mixture of emotions he could not quite name. When his mother stepped down, older and grayer than he remembered but with the same warm eyes, he felt something break open inside him. "Harlan." Her voice was thick with tears. "My boy." He embraced her, holding tight. "I'm sorry, Ma, for everything, for staying away so long. You're here now. That's what matters." She pulled back to look at him, then turned to Kate. "And you must be the woman who brought my son back to me." Kate smiled, a little shy. "I'm Kate. It's such an honor to meet you, Mrs. Garrett." Call me Helen, please, and thank you. Helen hugged Kate. Thank you for loving my son. They took Helen to the Thorne ranch, where she would stay until the wedding. Over the following weeks, Harlan watched his mother fall in love with Kate just as he had, charmed by her warmth and kindness. Helen also saw the house Harlan was building, and she cried when she walked through it, touching the walls with gentle hands. Your father would be so proud, she told him. You've built a good life here, Harlan, a real life. I almost didn't, he admitted. After Jesse, I thought there was nothing left worth living for. Jesse would have wanted you to be happy. He loved you so much. Helen took his hand. He would have loved Kate too. The grief was still there, would always be there in some form, but it no longer felt like it was crushing him. Kate had been right that day in the schoolhouse. It did get better when you let people in, when you chose to live instead of just exist. The wedding took place on a bright April morning, the kind of day that felt like a promise. The church was packed with people, the whole town turning out to witness Kate and Harlan exchange their vows. Kate wore a dress of ivory lace that her aunt had made, and she looked so beautiful that Harlan felt his throat tighten when he saw her walking toward him. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Harlan promised to love and honor Kate, to be faithful and true, to build a life with her that honored both of them. Kate promised the same, her voice clear and certain, her eyes locked on his. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Harlan kissed her with all the love and gratitude overflowing in his heart, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward was a joyful chaos of food and music and dancing. Harlan danced with his bride, with his mother, with Kate's aunt, and half the ladies in town. He shook hands with what felt like every man in the territory and accepted congratulations with a smile that did not fade all day. He was happy, genuinely and completely happy, and the feeling was so foreign and so wonderful that he wanted to hold on to it forever. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Harlan and Kate said their goodbyes and rode out to their new home. He carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room that was lit by the lamp he had left burning that morning. Welcome home, Mrs. Garrett, he said. Home. Kate looked around, her eyes shining. That sounds perfect. They spent that night wrapped in each other, learning and loving, building the foundation of their marriage with tenderness and passion. Harlan had never felt so complete, so whole, as he did lying beside Kate in the darkness, listening to her breathe and feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. The months that followed were the happiest of Harlan's life. He worked the ranch during the day while Kate taught at the school, and in the evenings, they came together in the home they had built. They talked over dinner about their days, laughed at small jokes, made love in the soft darkness of their bedroom. On Sundays, they had dinner with Kate's aunt and uncle or entertained friends from town. It was a quiet life, but a rich one, filled with the kind of deep contentment that comes from being exactly where you are meant to be with exactly who you are meant to be with. In the summer, Kate told him she was pregnant. The news filled Harlan with a joy so intense it was almost frightening. A child. Their child. A family growing in the home they had built together. Are you happy? Kate asked, watching his face carefully. Happy does not even begin to cover it. He pulled her into his arms. You have given me everything, Kate. A home, a life, hope, and now this. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Kate grew uncomfortable in the late stages as the heat of summer pressed down. Harlan did everything he could to make her comfortable, bringing her cool water and fanning her on the porch in the evenings. His mother came to stay with them in the final weeks, helping with the housework and preparing for the baby's arrival. In late September, Kate went into labor. It was a long, difficult process that left Harlan pacing the porch in terror while Dr. Wright and Helen attended to Kate inside. He had never felt so helpless, listening to her cries and unable to do anything to ease her pain. But finally, after hours that felt like years, he heard a new sound, the thin, angry wail of a newborn. Dr. Wright appeared in the doorway, tired but smiling. "You have a son, Harlan. Mother and baby are both doing well." Harlan went inside on shaking legs to find Kate propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She smiled when she saw him. "Come meet your son," she said. He approached carefully, as if the whole moment might shatter if he moved too quickly. Kate pulled back the blanket to reveal a small red face with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. The baby's eyes were closed, but even in sleep, he looked determined. "He's perfect," Harlan whispered. "He is." Kate looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "What should we name him?" Harlan thought about it, looking down at his son. He thought about Jesse, about the brother he had lost and the guilt he had carried for so long. He thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment, to this woman, to this life. "Jesse," he said, "after my brother, if that's all right with you." "Jesse Garrett." Kate tested the name, then nodded. "It's perfect. Your brother would be honored." Harlan held his son for the first time, marveling at how small and fragile he was, how complete. This tiny person was a new beginning, a chance to build something good from the ashes of the past. He was terrified and awed and more in love than he had ever been. The first year of Jesse's life was a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Harlan learned to change diapers and walk the floor with a crying baby and sing lullabies in a voice that was rough but sincere. Kate handled it all with the same grace she brought to everything, patient and loving, even when she was exhausted. They took turns getting up with Jesse, supported each other through the hard moments, celebrated every small milestone together. Watching Kate with their son filled Harlan with an emotion he could not quite name. She was so natural as a mother, so nurturing and joyful. She made even the hardest parts of parenting seem lighter, just as she had made his grief feel lighter. She was the center of their family, the light that drew them all together. As Jesse grew into a toddler, bright-eyed and curious about everything, Harlan felt the last pieces of his grief settle into something manageable. He would always miss Jesse, his brother, would always carry the sadness of that loss, but it no longer defined him. He had built a new life, filled it with love and purpose, and in doing so had honored his brother's memory in the best way he could. One evening when Jesse was almost 2, Harlan and Kate sat on the porch watching their son toddle around the yard, chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. Kate leaned against Harlan's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, content. "Do you remember the night you proposed?" Kate asked. "What you said about me making hard times feel light?" "I remember every word." "I've been thinking about that, about how we both came to Roswell carrying grief and trying to find our way, and somehow we found each other instead." She turned to look up at him. "You make my life light too, Harlan. You make every day better just by being in it." "You saved me," he said simply. "I was drowning, and you threw me a rope. You gave me a reason to keep going, to try again, to believe I deserved good things. We saved each other. That's how it works when it's real." She kissed him softly. "And this is as real as it gets." Their son let out a delighted shriek as he caught a firefly, holding his cupped hands up to show them his prize. Harlan and Kate laughed, calling him over to see. Jesse ran to them on chubby legs, his face lit with joy, and Harlan caught him up in his arms, holding him close. This was his life now. This woman, this child, this home. The weight he had carried for so long had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something bearable, something that no longer prevented him from moving forward. Kate had been right all along. Hard times did feel lighter when you shared them with someone who loved you, when you let yourself be part of something bigger than your own pain. The years passed in the way that good years do, full of work and love, and the everyday miracles of family life. Jesse grew tall and strong, a boy who loved horses and stories and had his mother's gift for finding joy in simple things. 2 years after Jesse was born, Kate gave birth to a daughter they named Emily, who had her father's serious eyes and her mother's bright smile. And 2 years after that, another son arrived, whom they named Thomas after Kate's uncle. Their home was full of laughter and noise and the controlled chaos of raising 3 children. Harlan continued working at the Double R, eventually becoming Ross's partner when the older man decided to step back. Kate taught for a few more years before deciding to focus on their growing family, though she continued to tutor children who needed extra help. They faced challenges, as all families do. There were lean years when the cattle market was bad, illnesses that frightened them, moments when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming, but they faced it all together, drawing strength from each other. And somehow that made even the hardest times bearable. Harlan's mother lived with them in her final years, surrounded by the grandchildren she adored. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at 73, Harlan grieved but also felt grateful for the time they had been given, for the reconciliation and the love they had shared. Kate's aunt and uncle remained close, part of the extended family that gathered for Sunday dinners and holidays and any excuse to be together. The community they were part of sustained them, just as Kate had known it would all those years ago when she had convinced a grieving cowboy to attend a church social. As Harlan grew older, his hair turning silver and his body bearing the marks of decades of hard work, he often thought about that summer day in 1883 when he had ridden into Roswell with nothing but a tired horse and a soul that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He had been broken then, convinced that happiness was something that happened to other people, not to men like him who carried the weight of failure and loss. But Kate had shown him different. She had loved him when he did not love himself, had believed in him when he had lost all faith, had made him understand that grief did not have to be the end of the story. She had been the woman who made even hard times feel light, and he had needed that more than he had known. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. Jesse was married now with a son of his own, working as foreman on a ranch north of town. Emily had become a teacher like her mother, full of passion for her students. Thomas was still at home, helping Harlan with the ranch, and courting a girl from church with a seriousness that made his parents smile. The house was full of family and friends, the same warm chaos that had defined their lives together. But at one point, Harlan found Kate alone on the porch, looking out at the sunset painting the desert sky in shades of gold and rose. "Hiding from your own party?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Just taking a moment to appreciate it all." She leaned into him when he put his arm around her. 30 years, can you believe it? Some days it feels like yesterday, other days it feels like you've always been with me. He kissed the top of her head. Best 30 years of my life. Mine too. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you remember what you were like when you first came to Roswell? So closed off and hurting?" "I was a mess," he admitted. "You were grieving. There's a difference." She turned to face him. "But look at what you built from that grief. Look at this life, this family. You took all that pain and transformed it into something beautiful." "We did that," he corrected. "I could never have done any of this without you." "We did it together, that's the point." She cupped his face in her hands, her eyes still bright despite the lines time had etched around them. "You made my life an adventure, Harlan Garrett. Every single day with you has been a gift. Even the hard days? Especially the hard days, because we got through them together and that made us stronger," she smiled. "You're still the man I fell in love with. The one who was brave enough to try again, to let himself hope, to build something from nothing." He kissed her then, long and sweet, pouring 3 decades of love into it. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "We should get back to the party," she said. "Our children will wonder where we went." "Let them wonder a few more minutes." Harlan held her close, looking out at the land they had made their home. The house he had built with his own hands stood solid behind them. The fields stretched out before them, dotted with cattle bearing their brand. Their children and grandchild were inside, living proof of the love they shared. This was what he had been given when he had thought there was nothing left to hope for. This woman, this life, this profound and simple happiness. Kate had brought him back from the edge of despair, had shown him that even the darkest nights eventually gave way to dawn. She had made hard times feel light, not through magic or miracles, but through the steady, unwavering presence of her love. And he had loved her in return with everything he had, building a life that honored both the man he had been and the man she had helped him become. As the sun set over the desert and the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Harlan held his wife close and felt nothing but gratitude. For her, for their children, for every day they had been given together, for the choice he had made to stop running and start living, for the light she had brought into his darkness and the way she continued to bring it day after day, year after year. They went back inside together, hand in hand, to the party and the family and the life they had built from love and hope and the simple determination to face whatever came next together. And if sometimes in quiet moments Harlan thought about the brother he had lost and the guilt he had carried for so long, he also thought about how Jesse would have loved Kate, would have adored his nieces and nephews, would have been proud of the life Harlan had built. The grief never fully left, but it had become part of the tapestry of his life rather than the entire pattern. And that, he had learned, was the best anyone could hope for. Not to forget, not to stop hurting completely, but to weave the sadness into something larger, something that also contained joy and love and hope. As the evening wore on and their children made toasts and their grandchild fell asleep in Emily's arms, Harlan looked across the room at Kate. She was laughing at something Thomas had said, her face bright with happiness, and he felt his heart swell with love so intense it was almost painful. She was the woman who had made even hard times feel light, and he had needed that more than he had known. But what he understood now, after 30 years of marriage and a lifetime of love, was that she had needed him too. They had saved each other, had built something beautiful from their shared grief and determination to try again. That was the real miracle. Not that they had found each other, though that was lucky enough, but that they had chosen each day to keep loving, keep trying, keep building. That they had faced hard times and good times together and come through stronger for it. The party continued late into the night, full of music and laughter and the kind of joy that comes from being surrounded by people you love. And when it was finally over and they were alone in the house that had sheltered their family for 3 decades, Harlan and Kate lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, her head on his chest and his arms around her. "I love you," he said into the quiet, "more than words can say. I love you too, always have, always will." She pressed a kiss over his heart. "Sleep now. We have years still ahead of us. Years together. Years of sunrise and sunset, of hard work and simple pleasures, of grandchildren and great-grandchildren yet to come. Years of loving this woman who had shown him that life after loss was not just possible, but could be beautiful." Harlan closed his eyes and held his wife close, grateful for every moment, every day, every year they had been given. The weight he had carried for so long was still there, transformed now into something that no longer crushed but instead grounded him, reminded him of where he had been and how far he had come. And as he drifted off to sleep with Kate warm and safe in his arms, Harlan knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Home, with the woman who had brought him back to life in the life they had built together from love and hope and the profound, simple courage to try again.